Now, you'd think that the demise of an arch-terrorist with the blood of thousands of Americans on his hands would be celebrated in the international media. Unfortunately, you'd be wrong. Over the last week, we've seen multiple major mainstream media sources attempt to whitewash the memory of Hassan Nasrallah, a mass murderer and the leader of Hezbollah, a terror proxy of the Islamic regime in Iran. This man was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of U.S. soldiers, such as the 1983 Marine barracks bombing in Lebanon. He's responsible for the kidnapping and murder of civilians all over the world, for plane hijackings, for bus bombings, for numerous suicide bombings, and even for sending terrorists to Iran to murder and maim Iranian protesters. Yet this is how the AP described him: charismatic and shrewd. Instead of speaking about his murderous history and obsession with slaughtering Americans, the New York Times described him as a revered Shiite Muslim cleric, and The Guardian described him as a qualified Islamic scholar, effective public speaker, and competent organizer. The Washington Post described him as a father figure, a moral compass, and a political guide. Yes, the same Washington Post that described ISIS leader al-Baghdadi as an austere religious scholar upon his demise. What is going on in these newsrooms? Is it really that hard to report the news without a glowing eulogy of monstrous terrorists? I don't think it's unreasonable to say that terrorists who mass murder innocent civilians and hijack planes shouldn't be praised for their achievements across the mainstream media. This is not journalism. It's sanitizing the murderer of American soldiers, of Iranian protesters, of Jews in Argentina, of Israeli men, women, and children, and of countless other innocent people for over 4 decades. To all the mainstream media minimizing Nasrallah's terrorism, please do better. The Israeli air offensive is continuing to degrade Hezbollah in Lebanon and comes amid rising speculation that a limited IDF ground operation is imminent. At the same time, the U.S. is stepping up efforts to bring a diplomatic resolution and avoid regional war. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Speculation abounds about a potential IDF land operation in South Lebanon. The IDF remains on the offensive with waves of airstrikes targeting Hezbollah missiles and missile launchers in the Bekaa Valley in northern Lebanon. Targeted attacks claim the lives of the leader of Hamas in Lebanon, as well as the leadership of the PFLP. In separate attacks. This morning, Hamas announced that its leader in Lebanon, Fateh Sharif Abu El-Amin, was killed in an Israeli strike in the south. The Air Force struck again in Beirut, for the first time hitting the Kola district, targeting and killing 3 leaders of the PFLP. Meanwhile, the body of Hezbollah terror chief Hassan Nasrallah was recovered from the site of the Israeli airstrike. This was the moment the body was removed from the terror group's underground headquarters in Beirut. Amid the ongoing Israeli aerial offensive, Hezbollah is continuing to fire rockets at northern Israel, but there has not been a massive retaliation following the killing of its leader Nasrallah. Red alert sirens sounded in Tzfat, Haifa, Akko, Nahariya, and surrounding localities across the Galilee. The rockets were either downed by air defense or fell in open areas. No injuries were reported. Washington has launched a diplomatic offensive. At the same time, Washington has authorized its military to reinforce the region in case of further escalation, while urging a diplomatic solution. President Biden said he would talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu about efforts to avoid all-out war in the Middle East.
Are you going to talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu? You haven't had anything to say to him?
Yes, I will be talking to him, and I'll tell you what I say to him when I talk to him.
Can an all-out war in the Middle East be avoided?
It has to be. We really have to avoid it. We've already taken precautions relative to our embassies and personnel who want to leave, but we're not there yet, but we're working like hell with the French and many others.
U.S. National Security Advisor John Kirby said the U.S. must be prepared for Iranian retaliation against Israel for strikes on Hezbollah.
We're watching this very, very closely to see how, if and how, Hezbollah and or Iran may react, as well as the militia groups in Iraq and Syria. We have to be prepared for some sort of response. We have to make sure that we are ready, and we are. We believe we have the force capability we need in the region, but it's not clear right now. Too soon to know.
Now, it's important to note that in addition to that report, it was confirmed later in the day that the Hamas leader in Lebanon, who was assassinated by the IDF, Fateh al-Sharif, was also an employee of UNRWA. Now, dozens of Israeli planes carried out a devastating airstrike 1,800 kilometers from Israel, targeting Houthi infrastructure in Yemen. This was the second time Israel has retaliated against the Houthis and comes after the terrorists fired a ballistic missile that was shot down before reaching central Israel over the weekend. Back to ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Dozens of aircraft, including fighter jets, tankers, and reconnaissance planes, took part in the operation, hitting targets in Yemen 1,800 kilometers away from Israel. Both the Hodeidah and Ras Isa ports and power plants were hit. Reports from Yemen say 4 people were killed and 29 wounded in the strikes. The attacks were more extensive than the one in July. It also came on a day the Air Force struck targets in Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, and allegedly Syria, tackling multi-front missions. On Saturday, a missile fired by the Houthis at central Israel was shot down without causing injuries. The Houthis claim it was aimed at Ben Gurion Airport when Prime Minister Netanyahu's plane had just landed, bringing him home from New York. Israeli retaliation was not long in coming. An Israeli official explained that the goal of the strike was to impose a heavy toll on the Houthis for their attacks on Israel. He added that the message to Iran was clear. Israel can strike powerfully, even 2,000 kilometers away, and simultaneously across multiple fronts.
As Israel battles multiple fronts with stunning success in the past 2 weeks, many are wondering if this retaliation from Israel will deter or perhaps escalate conflict in the region. Colonel Miri Eisen joins us to discuss the next steps in Gaza, Yemen, and Lebanon as the IDF battles on against multiple terror groups. Colonel Miri Eisen, thank you for joining us today. As always, a pleasure to have you on. To start, what's your take on the IDF strikes on the Houthis? Is what we saw yesterday something that can deter a further escalation?
So deterring the further escalation has to do with who you're attacking. And yesterday, Israel openly and declared that we were attacking the Houthis. When we do this in an open way, meaning it isn't an attack that we as if did not do, we did this one. What Israel is saying, we can do things, and I'm going to be cute about this, far, far away. What is the other place that is far, far away? That would be the Islamic regime of Iran, and that also is thousands of kilometers away. We can do this kind of attack not only in Yemen, we can simultaneously do so as we're attacking the targets of Hezbollah in Lebanon, supposedly in Syria, and still fighting on the ground, both in the Gaza Strip and the ongoing confrontations in the West Bank. So Emily, what we're seeing here is really an overall capability, and Israel is on the offensive, not just with its capabilities, but also in the rhetoric.
Now, moving to Lebanon, there have been numerous calls for a ground operation to push Hezbollah back past the Litani River and restore security to the north. First, do you think that there will be a ground operation? And second, given the precarious situation in Lebanon and the international community's failure to enforce UN Resolution 1701, is pushing back Hezbollah, is pushing them back past the Litani, is that even achievable?
It's achievable in military terms, and in that sense, I think that I am one who supports it. Let's be clear. I'm not for military force if you can avoid it. But the reason I support it is because I think you cannot avoid it. I want my friends to be able to go back home. You cannot go back to Metula or Shtula or Kiryat Shmona when you know that on the other side of the border are still the Radwan forces. Those are the elite Hezbollah terror fighters, the ones that were preparing an October 7th attack, the ones that even as Israel from the air tries to attack them, they are dug in deep, they are inside the towns and villages, they are underground. And I say sadly, like with the Gaza Strip, we will have no choice if we want to really take care of it, but to go on ourselves. You mentioned the international forces. They have had a mandate from 2006 to stop that type of infiltration, to stop the terrorists from going down, to stop that buildup of arms. It was not done, not by UNIFIL. They work hand in hand with the Lebanese army. For me, Israel needs to go in and do it, but you do have the international forces there that perhaps, and I'll just put the perhaps, afterwards they would be the ones who would make sure that Hezbollah does not come back south after Israel clears out those arsenals of weapons.
Now, in Gaza, we have also seen significant successes in recent days, but of course, no progress on the hostage situation. Israel, of course, is now in a position of strength. However, do you think that there will be further hostage negotiations, or are we really at an impasse?
I'm not sure I agree with the thing of us being in a point of strength when it comes to the hostages. The hostages, one of the reasons that they took the hostages is because they view these people, these friends, as bargaining chips. And for us, it's our fathers, grandparents, children, and etc. And same goes for Hezbollah up north, which is why we want to make sure that they cannot be in a situation that they would take hostages. So I don't think of us as being in a position of strength. Having said that, I think that Hamas is in a weaker position. And I know that sounds like it contradicts, but there's a difference between us being in a strengthened point and in making sure that Hamas is not in a strength point. And in this sense, the attacks against Hezbollah, the taking out of Hassan Nasrallah, the taking out of those commanders, that most definitely weakens Hamas's position, and that is good for us.
Now, finally, we are running out of time, but the elephant in the room, the Islamic Republic of Iran, has been promising revenge for months. Is this regime a paper tiger, or are we really on the brink of war?
So the question is if revenge is full war. There's a lot of ways that you can do revenge. The Islamic regime is one that does terrorism for revenge. I am worried about any place around the world that the Islamic regime of Iran perceives as being Israeli or being Jewish. It could just have a Star of David, and they're going to see this as a target so that they could retaliate in their terms anywhere around the world. Will they fire directly against Israel? They did on the night of the 13th, 14th of April. They may do so again. I'm more worried about their retaliation around the world.
All right, Colonel Miri Eisen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Following the death of Nasrallah, Israelis and Jews around the world have celebrated this victory, and in Tel Aviv, a group of graffiti artists have done just the same. ILTV's Ariella Lachiani has more.
In Tel Aviv, a local graffiti collective called Graffitial marked the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah with provocative new artwork. The group, led by artist Liran Tapiro, worked through Saturday night to depict Nasrallah as a barking dog, symbolizing his failure to harm Israel as intended.
We decided to paint him like a dog and of barking, and at the end he didn't manage to bite us as he wanted.
The mural also features the words "Game Over," referencing the deadly incident earlier this month when Israel detonated hundreds of booby-trapped pages, killing and wounding thousands of Hezbollah members.
I feel like this moment of Nasrallah is also a moment for us of hope after such a hard time we had, and with the war in Gaza and the war in Lebanon, and it was so hard that I think for us today was a small moment of light, that maybe there is an end to all this situation.
Despite the tensions, the graffiti is seen by many Israelis as a symbol of defiance and a possible turning point in the conflict.
I think the message is, if your mission and goal in life is to terrorize people, the end of it will be game over, like you see. So it's beautiful.
With all the economic difficulties impacting Israel since the war began on October 7th, poverty in Israel is on the rise. The Israeli NGO Meir Panim is working feverishly to break the poverty cycle, as some 21% of the nation's families struggle for food and basic necessities. Joining us today on ILTV is Mimi Rosmarin from Meir Panim. Mimi, thank you so much for joining us today. Can I start by asking you, how bad is the poverty situation in Israel? You know, more than 11 months into this war, how has the war impacted those now in need?
What we see with this war is a ripple effect of the economic hardships. So those of our patrons that already were having a hard time in Israel are having a harder time now. And with the war, we've seen an extra 500,000 people in this country facing financial hardship due to their professional work. So what we have been seeing is an increase in need of people coming to us for help every day.
Now, there are many heartbreaking stories of people who have been forced out of their homes due to the war. They've lost businesses. Some have lost loved ones, of course, in this conflict. People who would not normally be in poverty. I imagine they'll need help returning to their homes and rebuilding their lives, right?
One thing that is incredible about our Meir Panim centers is that they really serve as community centers for the communities in which they sit. And we're seeing displaced families and people that are most affected by the war come in and be welcomed with open arms and get the confidence to continue with their lives and feel whole again while they're with us. And hopefully we can, please God, very soon relaunch them back to their homes and their routine.
Now, how is Mir Panim helping these people, these families in need?
So we do a few things. We help people first and foremost. We're most well known for our food and our restaurant-style soup kitchens, which provide a hot meal and a warm welcome to anyone who comes in. Through the war, we've really taken on an expanded mission, and we're providing help getting people furniture and home goods and registering their kids from school, especially those that are displaced from their home and people that are facing poverty, as you said, for the first time due to the economic effects of the war. So we start generally as a place where people go to get a hot meal, but we end up taking care of people's whole bodies and souls.
Now, how can our viewers support the work of Mir Panim? I know you guys are an NGO, a private organization. How can our viewers support your work?
There's a few ways. I think it's really impactful to share that we exist and that we're completely publicly funded. We don't get any money from the government. Yet for the past 11 months, we've been able to continue in our expanded mission, taking care of IDF troops, displaced families, people newly in poverty, and we've been able to do that because of financial support. And the more donations we receive from the community, the more we can do and the more people we can help. But anyone that shares our story and shares our mission and checks into our website and learns about what we do can be inspired to be a part of our work in any way that they're able.
And actually, I did want to note that on our screen now, you actually can support the work of Mir Panim with the QR code that's on the screen. But I wanted to ask you in closing, are there any specific stories that have been particularly impactful over the last 11 months highlighting the work of Mir Panim?
I think there is definitely one or two that speak out to me specifically. I met a mom at one of our centers in Or Akiva who had been displaced from her home in Kiryat Shmona. Her name's Maya. And she had been from Kiryat Shmona sent to a refugee hotel in Eilat for months and months with her 2 teens. And I have 3 young kids at home, and I cannot imagine being in a joint hotel room with them. And so her story in particular struck me because we were able to get her out of the refugee hotel with her 2 teens into an apartment in the Or Akiva area where we could get her set up and get her kids registered for school. And as the months go on and it feels like less temporary and more unfortunately permanent, that we were able to get that one family into a new normal while they wait to go home feels so impactful.
Absolutely. Such important work that you guys are doing at Mir Panim. Again, you can learn more about them and support them at the QR code on the screen. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Mimi. Thank you for all the work you guys are doing. Israeli MK and former Minister Gideon Sa'ar, a member of the opposition, has joined the Israeli government of Prime Minister Netanyahu, despite being a harsh critic of Netanyahu in the past, even splitting off from the Likud party to form his own party, New Hope. The expansion of the government with the addition of Gideon Sa'ar will strengthen Netanyahu's coalition, making him less reliant on other members of the coalition government. Sa'ar, who is known for his hawkish positions, has a long history of political rivalry with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but the two have agreed to set aside the rift for the sake of the country. Prime Minister Netanyahu stated, "We will work together shoulder to shoulder, and I intend to seek his assistance in the forms that influence the conduct of the war." Sa'ar will serve as a minister without portfolio and will also join the Prime Minister's security cabinet. Nearly a year has passed since the tragic events of October 7th, yet the pain endures. We invite you to register for our virtual memorial event with Israel Bonds on October 7th at 12 p.m. Eastern or 9 a.m. Pacific time, where we'll remember the innocent lives lost and honor the resilience of our people. This event is free and open to all. Click on the QR code on the side of the screen to register. An Israeli investment analyst believes the country's economy could improve if war spending is reduced and conflicts with Hamas and Hezbollah are contained. This is despite a recent downgrade in Israel's credit rating by Moody's due to escalating geopolitical risks. More on this from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
An analyst from a leading Israeli investment firm says the country's economy could improve if war spending on the conflicts with Hamas and Hezbollah is reduced by the next year.
I see it stabilized. I see it better a year from now. I think that the cost of war, if not going on, not expanding into other areas like Iran, if we can limit the war to South Lebanon and to limit their ground operation, I think the situation will relatively rapid stabilize and be better. And then we'll see the risk of the economy going down. and the ability to invest more in the economy, reinvest, and the climate of doing business in Israel will improve, I think, in the short term. And in 5 years, definitely much better than now.
Bernard Menor, an institutional portfolio manager at IBI, made these comments to Reuters following Moody's decision to downgrade Israel's credit rating from A2 to Baa1, marking the lowest rating the country has seen in 25 years. Moody's cited the recent escalation of the conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon as a key factor. The downgrade leaves Israel's credit rating 3 notches above investment grade, with Moody's pointing to significantly increased geopolitical risks that are negatively affecting the country's creditworthiness in both the short and long term.
I think it reflects the low trust of Moody's and other rating agencies in the steps of the Israeli government to lower inflation, to deal and to cope with the higher deficit, as we see as a negative impact of the ongoing war.
Menor believes that the war's financial burden and Israel's complex budget challenges contributed to Moody's decision, but he remains optimistic about the country's economic future if the conflict can be contained.
In Toronto, outrage erupted as a truck was seen driving through the city, inciting a fear of Muslims in Canada, whilst others have complained of double standards. ILTV's Ariel Lahiani has more.
In Toronto, a mobile advertising truck displaying Islamophobic messages has sparked outrage and prompted a hate crimes investigation by local police. The truck, seen driving around the city, showed images of Muslims praying in Nathan Phillips Square, paired with statements like, "Is this Yemen? Is this Syria? Is this Iraq? No, this is Canada. Wake up, Canada, you are under siege." The messages have been condemned as dangerous and Islamophobic, and the National Council of Canadian Muslims says this type of rhetoric fuels hate and division. Jewish community leaders have pointed out the double standard. After months of anti-Semitic incidents, including threats and attacks on Jewish institutions, they argue that the police have been slow to act. Toronto police say their investigation is ongoing and they are asking anyone with information or footage of the truck to come forward.
And now I'm thrilled to invite you to the next ILTV community webinar. This is a chance for our paid subscribers to connect directly with our editor-in-chief, Maayan Hoffman, and dive into the questions you care most about regarding Israel. The webinar will take place this week on October 1st, and it is exclusively for our app subscribers. If you're already part of the ILTV family, watch your inbox for a registration link. Not a subscriber yet? No worries, there's still time to join us.
Sagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines crafted with generations of expertise.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, cloudy skies and scattered showers are expected in northern parts of the country, while the south enjoys sunny skies and highs of around 28 degrees Celsius or 82 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.